correspondences between certain 9/11 evidence and effects that were seen during cold fusion experiments in the late 1980s by Pons and Fleischmann. And they basically found that in their cells, which are basically, it's an electrolysis experiment, which means where you put 2 electrodes into a solution, you then pass a current through the cell, and then there are chemical changes that take place in the cell. You can do this yourself, get a 9-volt battery, 2 wires, put some salt in a glass, stir it up, put the 2 electrodes, 2 metal wires, 2 rods into I used to use razor blades when I was a kid doing this. They make good electrodes, but they dissolve quickly. And you get hydrogen. It's a good way to make hydrogen, and then you can collect it and make it go pop. That's electrolysis. But in their experiment, it was a bit more sophisticated. They used a palladium anode, I think, and I can't remember what the cathode was. And they used lithium hydroxide with deuterated water, which is basically heavy water. And they were getting some strange effects at certain times. And one time they went into their laboratory, and there was a hole in the floor. In fact, the whole thing they'd left it for several hours or overnight, and it basically turned the whole experiment to dust. And they were a bit concerned by that. But they couldn't reproduce it reliably.
Water itself is quite a mystery.
So I'm probably not got time to play this, but basically the two things in common with what was found at the World Trade Center and what was found in cold fusion experiments was transmutation. That's changing one element into another. In cold fusion, they found nickel and copper where copper shouldn't have been, and zinc coming out of their cells. And they found something called tritium, which is this form of hydrogen, which is only formed where there have been nuclear reactions. It's not found in other places. They found it about 50 times the level in the water from World Trade Center 6. Now, we again realised that this connection was very important when we came across this fellow on the screen, Stephen E. Jones, because he became a 9/11 researcher in 2005 when the NIST reports came out. And it turned out that he was working on cold fusion research in 1989, and he led a vote to try and discredit the research of Pons and Fleischmann to say that their claims of getting anomalous energy and excess heat were unfounded. So in other words, the same guy that was doing cold fusion research was talking about thermite being used to destroy the World Trade Center in 2007.
Since Pons and Fleischmann were both well aware of the pitfalls of premature publicity, why would they bypass the accepted conventions of the peer review system and announce their discovery through the media?
I was thinking, these guys are no fools. They know what they're doing. These are good scientists.
Prior to the 1989 announcement, Stephen E. Jones, a physics professor at nearby Brigham Young University, learned of Pons and Fleischmann's work through an informant at the DOE. In a flagrant example of shameless opportunism, Jones insisted on going public quickly with his comparatively much less clear results. Disparaging the excess heat claims of Fleischmann and Pons, Jones' announcement would have effectively prevented the two scientists from patenting their process, a process they had developed on their own over long years of research. On the advice of university attorneys, Pons and Fleischmann, feeling their backs to the wall, reluctantly delivered their work to public scrutiny.
So you can see that Jones was involved. That video was made in year 2000, way before the events that came after. And that's from a documentary called Heavy Watergate, which I recommend you watch. So Jones came onto the 9/11 research scene in September 2005, promoting a bogus explanation for the destruction of the World Trade Center based on the use of thermite. In other words, he disagreed with the official plane crash story, but he was producing a new bogus story. The cover-up he started then has been furthered by groups like Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which I'm going to come on to in a few minutes. It connects to what was said in the conference in Watford. This cover-up is still effective today, 12 years, in other words, 12 years after this thermite bogus explanation was put out in 2005. I regularly still see posting, oh yes, it was thermite, or yeah, it's probably thermite, or thermite and other things that destroyed the World Trade Center. No, it wasn't. We know what did it. And this brings us on again to another energy connection, because it turns out that Stephen E. Jones was friends with this other chap that some of you may have heard of, called Sterling D. Allen, who ran a site called PESWiki. And if you go onto that site, this is an energy thing. I'm talking about energy again, and this is going to connect into the UFO issue. That's where I'm going with this. The PESWiki site says, "Welcome to PESWiki, the community-built resource that focuses on alternative, clean, practical, renewable energy solutions. As of Wednesday, March 2016, there are 5,864 articles on free and renewable energy that anyone can edit." Must have been great. How long did it take to build that resource? How is it maintained? This is a prolific output. Now, I work on this fairly well, but I'm lucky if I can put together an article one a month. Sometimes it's one every 3 or 4 months. But the site is a useful resource, don't get me wrong. If you want to go to that PESWiki site, you'll find a lot of useful information on there, some really interesting stuff. I'm not saying that at all. But what about the guy that ran it? Now, he was friends with Stephen E. Jones. In fact, what happened was with this guy, when Dr. Wood was at this conference in 2012 discussing the destruction of the World Trade Center, she actually started talking about tritium. And when she did that, this guy, Sterling Allen, was at the conference too because he was invited. I think he helped to organise it, actually. This was in the Netherlands. It's called the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference. He came up to her and said, "Oh, you don't need to show that thermite because... you don't need to show about the tritium because you showed that yesterday." He was quite bothered that she was talking about tritium in relation to the events of 9/11. He was also given 1 hour's personal tuition by Dr. Wood during a break at the conference as to what actually happened and why this was an energy phenomenon. In a later article on his website, Sterling Allen misquoted parts of Dr. Wood's book. He used scanned images from the book without permission, and then he entitled the article "Tesla Death Ray" or something like that. And he confirmed that he was friends with Stephen E. Jones. He knew Stephen E. Jones. Apparently they lived together for a period of time. And Dr. Wood had mentioned Jones's role in the cover-up as I have today, and then he said, "Oh, I'm going to go back and talk to him about this because I don't think that's true." And I've written all of this up in an article called "Chilling Out About 9/11" with Sterling D. Allen. So in other words, we've connected Jones to 9/11, to energy. We've connected him to Sterling Allen, who runs this free energy-based website. But there are some murky connections here because it turns out that Sterling D. Allen is a paedophile, and he was arrested in 2016 for offences. And he was connected to... Jones is connected into the Mormon Church and so forth. Obviously can't make direct accusations, but again, if you look into this, for example, the correspondence between symbolism that's used in the Mormon Church and in the Freemasons, there's a lot of commonality there. So when we get to talking about 9/11 information, what you find out is when quoting Dr. Wood's research, it's ignored, it's misquoted, it's gotten wrong. Right? And I think this activity goes beyond a lack of knowledge, it goes beyond ego, and it goes beyond a lack of awareness. I've been working for nearly 10 years to make people aware of the truth of this. And some people do know now. But the cover-up about this remains in place. Now, I'm going to mention Richard Gage. Now, I can now prove that Richard Gage, who runs his Architects and Engineers group, is a liar. He is a liar. He bought a copy of Dr. Wood's book, yet he still claims that she ignores evidence of bombs and explosives when it's right on the index page of her book. He's claimed that. I've got audio clips of him saying it. And I have a copy of the cheque that he used, signed by him, to pay for that book. Yet he's going around saying that this book doesn't explain the evidence he talks about. That's a lie.